Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video from the Tiny Menagerie. Some tetras are absolute classics in the hobby, and everybody knows about them, like neons for example, while others are arguably just as common, and they may have just as much history, but they never seem to get the same kind of limelight. And silvertip tetras sadly definitely fall into this category. They are supremely common. I would in fact argue that as many people who have seen neons will probably have seen silvertips as well. And silvertips are, in my opinion at least, just as handsome as any neon, and they have the added benefit of being considerably hardier too. But what do they like to keep, and what kind of setup do they need? Well, much like the rest of their tetra cousins, silvertips hail from South America and in particular around Brazil. Here they inhabit the wider, more open waterways, preferring waters that are dim or tannin-stained and often littered with fallen vegetation. But to be honest, in the home aquarium they're really not that fussy when it comes to either tank style nor water parameters. They are perfectly suitable for a pH anywhere between 6 and 8, at a temperature that is in that very typical tropical fish range of 22 to 26 degrees. And in all honesty, a lot of this hardiness and tolerance for different water conditions comes from the fact that the vast majority of silvertips being sold today have come from captive populations rather than being wild caught. But, unlike a lot of other tetras, they haven't been extensively overbred nor inbred, and this has given rise to a very resilient little tetra that is cheap, cheerful, and can live in the vast majority of community setups. Silvertips are also perfectly happy in both sparse and densely decorated tanks, so long as you have good filtration as well, then it doesn't need to be planted or anything like that, and they're also perfectly brave in either dimly or brightly lit setups as well. Although, just to point out, while they are brave in a tank that has few decorations in it, you might want to make sure they have at least some decorations. And this is because when silvertips are young, they are perfectly happy, darling little shoalers, sticking close together and generally getting along just fine. But as they start to get older, that shoaling nature does go away sadly, and they get a little bit more on the territorial side. Individual males with breeding in mind will set up a small territory in part of the tank, and they will defend this vigorously from any other male that strays too close. Females can wander about with reasonable impunity, only getting the odd chase between them, but males need to have some way of breaking line of sight with each other in order to keep aggression at a minimum. But that's not to say that silvertips are highly aggressive. They're just on the chasey side. They can be a little bit thuggish with each other. And these chases often amount to little more than a nipped fin, and so as long as you can give them some cover, then usually they'll be able to get out of each other's way. As they are a sociable species though, you do need to have at least 6 individuals in a shoal. And because each of those fish needs to be able to establish its own tiny territory, then you'll want to house them in a tank that is at least 100 centimeters in length. This way, they are pretty much guaranteed to have enough space to be able to escape from each other should they need to. The other thing you can do as well, of course, is to limit the number of males that you have. Try to have a mostly female-dominated shoal, but sexing can be extremely difficult when you're buying them in a shop. If you find that your fish aren't able to get away from each other, you will end up with a situation where the most dominant fish will rule the tank and the less dominant ones will be endlessly bullied, so you might need to either separate them away, take them back to the store, or move them to a separate tank. Also, having that territorial nature does mean you'll need to be a little bit selective with your choice of tank mates for them. Silvertip tetras are persistent chasers, unfortunately, and they will target any fish that is roughly the same size as themselves or even just has the same coloration. And so I wouldn't trust mine with any fish that is either very slow and sedate, such as bettas, or even slightly faster ones but have very tempting fins or draw attention to themselves, like guppies for example. And I also don't try and keep them with very sensitive fish like the tiny rasboras or anything like that. And it's not that silvertips are aggressive towards them. It's not that they're going to hunt down and kill these other fish. It's just that their constant chasing and harassing can make them an eternal bother for others, which can of course in turn lead to stress, which can lead to a decrease in health, and you're going to end up with a diminishing population of fish, not because they're getting eaten, but just because they're getting stressed to death. Now, at the moment, I suspect I have rather painted the silver-tipped tetra in a very negative light, and while they do have cons that you really do need to consider before you buy them, they've got plenty of pros to keeping them as well. Firstly, and most obviously, is that classic standout look, with this almost logic puzzle feeling to that perfectly evenly spaced silver tips. It's hard to explain, but looking at a group of them together is a bit like looking at a herd of zebra. You stop seeing individuals and you focus more on the geometrically spaced silver tips. The females are a very appealing, deep, brassy yellow coloration with a lovely sheen to them, and the males in breeding condition will have a fiery copper shade. Both sexes grow to about the same size, about 5 centimeters long, with the females being slightly deeper and fuller in the body, but both are equally appealing in a tank. And another thing they've got going for them is that, while a lot of other species of tetras can be rather generously described as lazy, silver tips buck that trend. They are an active species that are always interesting to watch in the ways that they interact with each other. They have that sort of constant, peppery, slightly fed-up competitive edge to them. They're a species that you don't notice until they go zipping past the glass, and then as soon as you've spotted them, you just can't stop watching them. It's highly likely the reason why you started watching was because they were chasing something, some poor unfortunate trespasser in their sacred territory, but so long as you're housing them with other fish that can put up with that, a lot of the barbs, for example, will give just as good as they get, then silver tips are eternally entertaining. They are a fish you are not likely to get bored of anytime soon. They also primarily utilise the top 2/3 of a tank, although they occasionally do go down to look for food around the substrate, but they are not active hunters at all. And I found when keeping them with shrimp, for example, plenty of shrimplets will survive with even the most modest of cover for them. Although don't get me wrong, I'm not going to start keeping silver tips in with any shrimp that I'm trying to breed up, it's just that they won't make a massive dent in a shrimp population that's already established. Luckily though, they will also eat normal fish food as well as shrimplets, and in fact silver tips are just as competitive about feeding as they are in everything else, and they will race up to the surface of the water and snatch away any food that they can find. They are voracious, easily capable of holding their own against bigger fish, against fish which have more numbers than them, and even ones that seem to be trying to take the food off them. And because of this as well, they also have the benefit that they are fast growers. So if you're looking to establish a tank with a mature shoal quickly, then silver tips are well worth considering. And of course, much like a lot of the other tetras, silver tips do have that rather dubious honour of being quite cheap to purchase. And this is because they are hardy enough to be suitable for newer tanks, although of course it goes without saying that if you're going to add fish to a tank, make sure it's gone through its cycling phases and that it's mature enough to handle them. Overall though, silver-tip tetras are a hardy and easy enough species to accommodate, so long as you have a large enough tank for them, and tank mates who can withstand their enthusiasm, shall we say. With the right setup though, they are easy to feed, easy to accommodate, and easy on the eye. Anywho though, I hope you've enjoyed this little video all about the silver-tip tetra. Happy fish keeping everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!